and gentlemen, the United States has the moral obligation to join Assad. The United States, we have to protect our citizens from a body that is threatening to destroy the United States and all that it stands for. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'll be speaking about why this motion will actually give us more control over Syria, which team of opposition claims we do not have. But first I'd like to begin with refutation. So they talked about, I got in a POI and asked, why is the US not able to regulate? If they're in Syria, they'll be able to regulate. And to this they answered that Assad will not change overnight. He's not a good person. We agree. Assad's not a great person. We don't like him that much either. But the thing is, he will not change because he became good and he saw the light. He will change because he needs the United States. He will change because and I'll be speaking about this in my speech, he needs what we have to offer. ISIS is just as big a threat to Syria, if not bigger, than it is to the United States. No, thank you. The reason he is not capable of the status quo is because he doesn't have enough things. That's where we, the United States, come into the story. We come in, we give him things, we give him the technology he needs, and then he will be able to attack in Syria because the motivation they have, and the team opposition did not answer why they do not have motivation. All they said is Turkey is also good. Now, Turkey is definitely not the alternative. Not Turkey. Nothing. Sorry. Turkey are definitely not the alternative. Not the available alternative. We can't trust them. It took them way too long to come against ISIS, and they have gained financially from ISIS. They lack the motivation that my first speaker spoke about. No, thank you. They do not have what it takes. They will not want to fight. First of all, because we don't trust them. Second of all, because as my first speaker said, they cannot justify to their own country. They cannot justify how, like what happened in the United States in Iraq. They cannot justify bringing home dead bodies for a war that wasn't theirs, for a war they got into that has nothing to do with them. No, thank you. So they spoke about also how we will lose international value because the US, they'll say the US has no principles. Exactly the opposite. The United States will gain, no thank you, recognition because they will see that people stand. The United States does not stand for terrorist organizations. They do not stand for ISIS, for bodies like ISIS who are trying to destroy all of Western values. People will see that the United States is willing to go to extreme measures to protect their civilians and the world. Now I'll be moving on to my constructive speech. So I'll be speaking now about why we need to have control over Syria. So in the past, Syria has been quite the adversary, but they need us. ISIS is growing in Syria. They've taken land and oil from Assad, and he knows he'll have to fight them eventually. This is a great chance to leverage our control and get them to do several important things. Sure. Things like, no thank you. Things like, first of all, turn attention from the rebels. Second of all, stop killing civilians, as team opposition mentioned. And third of all, the long-term influence. So I'll begin with the first reason. So, turn attention from the rebels. Assad has seized the opportunity of ISIS's rise to power to continue attacking the rebels and as the rest of the world turns their attention away from them. The US convinced the rebels to fight against ISIS, and when Assad took the opportunity to, while they're busy fighting against ISIS, to attack them. Now, if the United States will cooperate, we will obviously turn the attention of his troops to ISIS and not to the rebels, and alleviate pressure from the rebels. We will no longer be able he won't be able to focus anymore entirely on the rebels because he will be focusing on ISIS with the United States. And the second reason why he will stop killing civilians, even if he continues to fight rebels, even if the United States cannot get their power, as the team of opposition has said and what we have reviewed, but even if they cannot, and if he continues to fight rebels, we can stipulate attacking only on armed forces and not civilian targets, as he's been doing till now. As a condition of our collaboration, we will not join him if he will continue to differentiate. He won't differentiate. No, we'll make sure he differentiates between the armed forces and the rebels. and he will no longer be able to bomb cities indiscriminately. Yes.
How will you make sure that Assad suddenly becomes a good guy and not a bad guy anymore?
As I've said, Assad will not become a good guy. We're not trying to save him, his soul. This is quite obvious. But what I've shown you, and what I'm in the middle of showing you, is why Assad actually needs us a lot more than we need him. Assad is the United States is Assad's only hope, because as you know, the United States has the biggest, strongest army in the world. He would definitely like to have that army on his side. He knows. No, thank you. Just the opposite of the debate. He knows that that the United States have the motivation to stop ISIS. He knows. We do not think he's going to change overnight, but we can control and we can regulate. When we are in Syria, as I said, by the first reasons, first of all, we can turn his attention from the rebels so he can focus on the United States. No, thank you. So he will focus on ISIS, because that's really the threat that they have in the status quo. What's going on now in Syria is problematic for them just as much as it is for us, because Syria is coming into the territories. They're taking land, they're taking oil, they're attacking this. I'll take you in a moment. They're attacking Syria, and this is making problems. Yes.
If Assad has the most powerful army in the world, as is what you're trying to prove now, how can you explain the fact that he hasn't been able to fight ISIS?
You misunderstood. I said the United States of America has the strongest army in the world. I was responding to your teammate who asked why Assad will suddenly change. It's because the United States has the strongest army in the world, and he needs us a lot more than we need him. So moving on to my third reason, long-term influence. Assad, Iran, and Hezbollah form a formidable opponent to the United States. In the status quo, they are not helping the United States. They're a big opponent in the Middle East to the United States. Gaining influence there will be very helpful for us in the long run. Having these people and gaining influence will help us tremendously in the future, because we want to make sure that even in the future, not just now to get rid of ISIS, but in the future, we will make sure that we have we will have more cooperation. So for example, Iran came to the negotiation table discussing their nuclear reactors and the legality because they want more cooperation. There were sanctions on Iran, and now they want the United States' help. They want their cooperation. They want the United States. The more we assist each other, the more this kind of thing will happen. The more they will be willing to reach across the aisle. Given that the rebels are still very unlikely to win in Syria, it would be ridiculous for us not to seize the opportunity to ensure that one of our enemies is beholden to us, and that we can control now what is going on in Syria. We can make sure that we destroy ISIS. We can make sure that the problem with the civil war will end, and we can make sure that we have power in the Middle East, and we can go back to living in peace. Thank you very much.
8:05. Thank you very much, Nelly, for that speech. And I would now like to call upon the second speaker of the opposition team, Wilhelm.
ISIS are terrible, and the situation as of right now in Syria and Iraq are horrible. But allying with a man who disrespects democracy, who disrespects human rights, who kills his own people, would definitely be worse. Mr. Speaker, today I would like to go through our third and final construction case, but first I would like to do some rebuttal. As of right now, as I mentioned in the POI earlier, we supply the rebels with weapons and funds, we are right now taking a stand in this debate, and I ask, should we then abolish this stand and support our own enemy? They said to us that we have a moral duty to make sure that we lose the previous lives. To that we say, by grouping up with the dictator who will kill 200,000 civilians of his own people, we will generate more deaths. This is true, because we will give Assad more weapons, we will give Assad more funds, and which he will no doubt use to kill his own people. Saying that he wouldn't do that is ridiculous, because they completely neglect basic criminal profiling. We are working with a man here who uses chemical weapons against his own people. Moving on. They also said that Assad would be an ally that would generate the fewest deaths. No, that is false, because supporting an undemocratic leader who is against everything the US stands for, which is freedom, human rights and democracy, will completely backlash into this example. And later I will tell you how allying with Assad will actually generate more deaths. No, thank you. They also used a lot of power and tried to tell us that Assad would change. They tried to tell us that perhaps he wouldn't become a good guy, but he would stop killing so many of his own civilians. We know Assad won't change, just because we ally with him. Assad's only intention is to move away the media spotlight from himself and the genocide he committed in his own people. He has no interest in the actual situation in his country changing right now. The IS came very handily for him to move away the media spotlight from himself and onto the IS. IS are killing Assad's people, whom Assad don't really seem to care about so far. He likes to kill them himself. Therefore, he has no intention as of right now to stop the IS when they are working for him as a media distraction. Proposition says that Assad will change because we tell him to. Assad don't need us. He knows that we will no matter what fight the IS later on because they pose a threat to us. He waits. He uses the IS to his advantage and he waits until we come in and do the job for him. So, we ask you, Team Proposition, could you please tell us why Assad will actually make a true difference in this war when he has been so passive so far? Prove to us why Assad has been so passive and prove to us why he will actually make a difference in this war. Now, I would like to move on to our third and final constructive case, which is called Worsening Situation in the Middle East. To this point, I have two subpoints. The first one is called Proxy Wars, and the second one is called On the Fence Civilians. I will start out with my first subpoint, which is called Proxy Wars. We currently see two proxy wars going on through the IS as of right now. We have a war between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and a proxy war between Sunnis and Shias. To make it easy, we would like to start with the proxy war between Sunnis and Shias. IS started out in Syria, where they attacked the Syrian government, who are Shia. Thereby, they fight against the Shias and they are Sunnis. If America were to join one side of the conflict, they take a stance. They choose a side. It might not be on purpose, but that is not what matters right now. But in this coalition, when the US takes sides with the Shias, the Sunnis will react. And even though it might not be on purpose, it doesn't matter, because it still might be perceived as that, which is the only thing important. It might be perceived as what it actually is, what is taking a stand. This leads me on to my second subpoint, which is on defense of civilians. This would lead to the bystanders and the Sunnis, to go with the IS, because they weren't sure which side they were on already. We have a large group of people like this right now in the Middle East who haven't taken a side because they don't know what side they are on as of right now. They see the US come and work with Assad and the Shias. No. They feel obliged to join with the IS because the Sunnis will feel like a Western power comes into the Middle East to suppress them and oppress them. They feel like the US decides to work with a horrible Shia dictator. They can't see no reason to actually support the Shia dictator and the US. No, thank you. Well, this will not go down well in the Sunni communities, and as well it will not go well down in Turkey, which is a neighbor to Syria. This will result in them joining the only alternative, IS. This will only make the IS stronger. I am not saying that Turkey will join the IS. I'm saying a lot of Turks will choose to join the IS because there are a lot of Shia. There are a lot of Sunnis in Turkey. So, when the US tries to hinder and stop the IS by joining forces with Assad, they are unintentionally making the IS stronger. Keep standing. This is essentially the case of this debate, because both sides want to limit the amount, the outspread of IS, but only opposition seems to understand that the motion will do the exact opposite. So while the fight between the Sunnis and the Shias is going on, there's a proxy war being fought between Saudi Arabia and Iran. But first I would like to take your view on it.
The prime goal of the United States is to protect their own citizens. While it's very sad that rebels are dying in Syria, how can you justify not joining up with the strongest person to protect the United States citizens?
We have seen the United States before heading into wars to protect their own freedom, protect their own rights, and protect their own safety. We have seen them joining into wars against Saddam Hussein, but before, having supported that entire government. We've seen Afghanistan, but they've supported Afghanistan for many, many years before going on to a full-fledged oil war in the middle of Afghanistan, completely destroying this people, completely destroying this nation. Saying that Assad doesn't know about this, saying that Assad does not notice this, and saying that Assad does not notice what happened to Afghanistan after the US were there would be completely ridiculous. And that is also one more reason to why Assad would not want the US to come into his country. They saw what happened to Afghanistan. Now back to my point. I was talking about the proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. These wars are going on between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And we believe that American intervention will only worsen this situation. Why is this true? This is true because Saudi Arabia and Iran don't necessarily want to fight. But when the IS grow larger because of American interaction, Saudi Arabia will have to continue supporting IS, even though they don't necessarily want to. No, please. Saudi Arabia abolished the IS in February, but maintained the money transfer and the weapon transfer to the IS to remain a good relationship with the Sunnis. Therefore, they will feel forced to support with further money, with further weapons. And because, as just described to you, American interaction will make the IS grow, this will generate further tension between Iran and Saudi Arabia because of the conflict growing exponentially, even though they don't necessarily fight. And that way, I answered my POI, I answered my first rebuttal point, where I told you I would like to cover this later about American interaction in the IS. So back to my point. Therefore, to limit the output and the growth of IS, we believe it would be much wiser move to work with, for example, Turkey, as we brought up earlier on. Because we that way will be able to generate results without further threatening the conflicts in the Middle East. Because Turkey have a relatively neutral stand in the Middle East. Because Turkey have the 4th largest army in the world. And only have interest in stopping the IS, which it just downstairs for them, across the borders in Syria. So, in my speech, I brought to you 3 major cases. I told you about the proxy wars that team proposition don't even consider. I told you that IS will grow if the US join the coalition. And I told you about possible alternatives for the US. So in conclusion, the US joining Assad will lead to multiple conflicts in the Middle East enlarging, the IS to grow, and the whole idea behind the coalition to fall entirely. For all those reasons, we can't see any reason to propose, and we know that to stop the IS and to actually make a difference, the only smart choice is, of course, to oppose. Thank you.
8:28.